Hello lovelies, welcome to another tutorial. So in this video I'll be showing you how I was able to recreate this beautiful dress. This is a flare dress with ruched shoulder to underbust, as you can see here. It's a very beautiful dress, and what is displayed here is the inspiration. So this is going to be a two-part tutorial. Here I'll share the pattern drafting and cutting, and in my next video I'll finish up with the sewing tutorial. So please do well to like, share, subscribe, watch this video to the end, and without wasting any more time, let's get right into the tutorial. Alright, so I'm going to begin by drafting out the pattern. Now you can most definitely cut this out directly on your fabric. You don't have to do a pattern for this, but I think it's just clearer to explain with a pattern than cutting it out on the fabric. So I have my lines drawn out already: shoulder, chest line, shoulder to bust point, under bust, waistline, and my hip line. Now here I'm trying to draw out my armhole curve and also my neckline. I'm using a neck width of 3 inches. I've just come down from that shoulder point by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, slanted it to the 3 inches neck width. I'm going in by 0.75 inches on the armhole. This is just basic stuff. This is just as a guideline. We're eventually not even going to cut out this armhole and everything. So now moving on, I'm just going to go on to mark my bust span measurement divided by 2 on the bust point, under bust, waistline. I'll go below the waistline by 6 inches. I'll confirm the 4 inches bust span measurement there, and I'll connect all these points together, as you can see. Now on the waistline, I'm going to mark out my dart. I'm using 0.6 inches as my dart on the 2 sides of that line, and then I'm just going to slant it up and slant it down, as you can see here. I'm going to go ahead and mark out my body circumference measurement, and I'll add 1.25 inches for sewing allowance. On the waistline, I'm going to replace the dart intake and also add 1.25 inches for sewing allowance. Now from below the waistline, we don't really need this because it's going to be a flare. I'm going to cut that directly on the fabric. But since we're working with the paper right now, I'm just going to mark my hip circumference measurement and add the allowance, and I'll use my ruler to connect the markings on the side. The next thing I'll go ahead to do is to mark out my neck depth. So my shoulder to my bust point is 10.5 inches. Now on the center of that bust point line, you can see the bust point line there, I'm going to go up by 1 inch. And then I'm going to slant from the neck width down to 1 inch above my bust point line. So this is my neck depth. Now on the under bust line, I'm going to also go up on this center point here. I'll go up by 1 inch as well, and I'm going to make a curve from there to blend with this under bust line, like this. So there's a slight curve at the center of the underbust. That's why I went above the underbust line by 1 inch. Now I'll go ahead and just mark out my side dart, which is 1.5 inches, and I'll slant it to meet the other dart legs. Now our dress is going to be divided into 3 parts for the front. So we have the flare part, which is from the waist down and is going to be cut on the fabric. Next is the band, which is from the underbust to the waistline, and the next part is the ruched part, which is the top part. So I just labeled that ruched because it's going to have some pleats on it. Now first of all, close my side dart because I don't want to sew it on the fabric, and I'll go ahead and just divide all these lines that I have marked here. So I'm cutting from the underbust straight into the side. I didn't cut it upwards. I'm going to cut out the band normally, and I'll take this flare part away because we don't need that. Now go ahead and just close up the dart. Now I've closed up the dart on the band, I'll come over to work on this top part. Now you can see that I have added an extra paper just to increase the length of this top part. Now from my shoulder down to my under bust line is 14 inches. And you know we have a little curve at the center of the underbust which went higher, so it's going to be shorter at that center part. And now the side of the underbust from shoulder down on the side is 12.5 inches, so it is 1.5 inches shorter as a result of the side dart that we closed on the side. So all the way from the side to the extra paper that I added, everything is going to be 12.5 inches because of the side dart that was closed. I don't want to confuse you. This thing is not difficult at all. So you know I have a neck width of 3 inches. I'm going to start from that neck width to mark out my sleeve length. So I want it to be about 13 to 14 inches when I am done completely. So I'm going to mark that 14 inches, which I expect my sleeve length to be. And now you know it is going to be ruched. There's going to be pleats, or I'll use an elastic to sew it upwards. So I'm going to add an extra 10 inches to this 14 inches so that by the time I am done sewing the elastic, or by the time it ruches up is going to shorten and is going to end at about 13-14 inches. Okay, I hope you understand the English that I'm speaking. Now you can go ahead and mark down at least 1 inch and draw out the shoulder slope at the length of the sleeve there, but I don't want to have any joining on the shoulders, so there's no point having a shoulder slope. Okay, I hope as we move forward you're going to understand better. Now I'm marking out my sleeve opening and I want that to be 8 inches. So on the sleeve length there I marked down 8 inches. This is the 8-inch point. Now I'm going to make a little curve down to the full length of this paper. So I just marked inwards 3 inches at the end there, just as a guide. I did this because I just want the armhole parts to blend into the side. You know, there's no armhole here. This is just like you're cutting out a boo-boo. I just hope I'm not confusing you. So now I'm just cutting everything out. I'm cutting out my neckline as well. And as for this little dart here, there's no point closing it because there are going to be pleats around this underbust line. So by the time I'm done pleating, the dart will eventually disappear. So here is my back pattern. I have my zipper allowance space here of about 1.25 inches. From the top, I have my starting line. Next, I have my chest line, my waist line, and my waist to hip line. So here, you know the difference between the front and the back. There is no bust at the back, so there is no bust point line, and there is no under bust line. And also, my shoulder to waist in front is 17 inches, while my shoulder to waist behind is 15.5 inches. This should not be news. I say this in almost all of my videos. Now, as you can also see, I've drawn out my armhole curve, I've drawn out my shoulder slant, which is really not necessary because we're not going to use it. You can tell from how we did the front part. So I have my neck width of 3 inches as well, same as the front. Now I'm going to mark out my dart. On my waistline, I marked in my bust span measurement divided by 2. I went above and below the waistline by 6 inches. I'm confirming that bust span measurement divided by 2 there, which is 4 inches by the way. And I'm connecting this point with a straight line. So on the waistline here, I'm going to mark 0.6 inches on both sides of the line. This is the same dart intake I used in front. So I'm just going to slant it upwards and downwards this way. Next, I'll go on to mark my body circumference measurements. On the chest line, I'm marking my bust circumference divided by 4 and I'm adding 1.25 inches. On the waistline, waist circumference divided by 4, I'll replace the dart intake of 1.25 and I'll add sewing allowance of 1.25 inches. I'll go ahead and just mark out my hip measurement, but remember from the waist down is going to be flare. But since we're on paper, I'm just going to mark everything out here. Next, I'll use my ruler to connect the markings on the side like this. And now the next thing I'm going to mark is the landmark for where the ruche is going to stop. So you know the ruche in front stops at the under bust line, but since there's no bust at the back, we need a landmark for where the ruche behind is going to stop. Now let's just assume I can mark my shoulder to under bust at the back, the same way I can mark my shoulder to waist at the back. You know, my shoulder to waist behind is 1 inch shorter than my shoulder to waist in front. So now I'm going to mark my shoulder to under bust behind the same way. So I'll mark my shoulder to under bust behind 1 inch shorter than my shoulder to under bust in front. So remember that my shoulder to under bust in front is 14 inches. I'm going to subtract 1.5 inches from that 14 inches and mark 12.5 inches. I hope that makes sense. So I want the top part of the front and the back to be the same length, especially on the side, because it's going to be like a sleeve going from front to back. That's why I marked 12.5 inches. If you remember when I drafted out the front part, it was also 12.5 inches by the side. Okay, I hope you remember after closing the side dart. Now you can see here I've gone ahead to just slant down from the neck width down to that under bust line, and I went in on the waistline by 0.5 inches to take off some zip bulge. I slanted it upwards and I slanted it downwards as well. Now I'll go ahead to just cut it out. I'm labeling this top part the ruched part, labeling the band, and the lower part the flare part. So I'll just cut out this band here and I'll close the dart just like I did for the front. I'll hold it with my cello tape and then I'll go ahead and cut off this flare part and take it off completely because I don't need it. I'm cutting out my neck depth. Now I'm bringing back this band piece. The zipper is going to start from this band down to wherever I want it to stop, and I'll also not be closing the dart on this ruched part. Now I'll go ahead and just add a little extra paper to increase the length of this top part. I'll go ahead and mark out my sleeve length, which is 24 inches including the 10 inches of allowance, and I'm going to mark out my sleeve opening of 8 inches. I'll draw a straight line downwards and I'll make that little curve I did in front. So I'm just bringing in the front piece to trace out the exact curve, and I'll just cut everything out. Now I'm bringing in the two top pieces. I have the front here and I have the back right behind it. I'll go ahead and just place them so you can see the little differences that they have. So this is the back. It's sharp straight from the top down to 12.5 inches, which is a bit higher than the front part at the center. Okay, so you can see that the underbust part of the front has a little curve. The differences are not so much because from the side all the way to the end, for the front and the back pieces, they're the same. The length and the width, they are all the same. It's just the slight differences at the center front and the center back. Now go ahead and seal up the front and the back along the shoulders, because like I said, I don't want any joining along the shoulders, so it's going to just be one piece flowing from the front across the shoulders all the way to the back. Now you can see how I'm folding it. So this is how it is sort of going to be after I cut it out on the fabric. Now I'm done drafting and cutting out the patterns, I'll go ahead and cut it out on the fabric. So this is the fabric I'm using. This is crepe. I made use of about 4 yards in total. Now I'll go ahead and just lay my fabric flat. I'm not placing anything on a fold. As you can see, I'm cutting out the front and the back together, so I'm placing it flat this way. I'll go ahead and add 0.5 inches of allowance all around and I'll cut it out. Okay, so we're not placing it on a fold. My fabric is laid flat open and the paper is laid flat on top of the fabric, as you can see right here. So I'm going to cut this off camera because my surface is really small, so I could not really show how I cut everything. So just take note that I added 1/2 inch everywhere all around this pattern. So you can see here how I've cut everything out. I added my allowance everywhere. So I cut out 2 pieces for this, one for the right side and the other for the left side. Now the next thing I'm going to cut out is my band pieces. So for the front band, I'm adding 0.5 inches to the top and the lower part. No allowance to the side because it already has sewing allowance. And the other edge is on a fold, the center edge. Now I was supposed to cut out a lining piece at this point, but I wanted to be done cutting out the main pieces first, so I know if my fabric would be enough for me to cut out the lining. So I'll place the front band aside and cut out the back band piece. I'm cutting it out on a fold. I'm cutting out the top with 0.5 inches of allowance and the lower part as well. Next is to cut out the flare, which is going from the waist to the full length. So this is a maxi dress, so it's going all the way to my toes. Now I'll just show you how I cut it out, or how I folded and cut out the flare on this mini paper here, because I cannot show how I folded it because my surface is really small, like I've been saying. So I'll go ahead and just fold my paper this way. You saw how I picked one edge to the other edge. I'm just going to place it this way, the folded edge facing me, and I'll label that center front, and I'll label the open edge the side front. I hope you're paying attention. Next, I'm going to go ahead and mark out my waist circumference measurement divided by 4. So my waist circumference is divided by 4 is 8 inches. I added 1 inch for sewing allowance on the side. I've just marked it out there. 8 inches plus 1 inch for sewing allowance, and the length of the flare from my waist down is 44 inches. That's what I worked with. So I'm going to measure from the top down 44 inches. So let's assume the 5 inches on this ruler is 44 inches. So I'll mark 44 inches this way, and I'll keep turning the ruler till I get to the open edge. So marking 44 inches until I get to this end here. I'm just going to blend all the points together like so, and I'll go ahead to cut it out. And when I open this up, you can see how it looks. It's going to fall. It's just that this is paper and it's very stiff, but you know, when you cut it out on the fabric, it's going to fall on the side. Okay, so I'll use the front piece to cut out the back piece. I'll place my fabric on a fold. Although I'm cutting out 2 separate pieces for the back, I'm just going to trace out exactly what I have for the front. So I'm leaving a little space for allowance at the center back, for my zipper allowance rather, at the center back. Then I'll trace out whatever I've cut out in front and use it to cut out the back. Okay, so the back is 2 separate pieces because of the zipper at the center back. So I just wanted to illustrate how I cut it out using this small piece of paper. Now these are the main fabric pieces here. This is my front piece on a fold. You can see how it looks. It's almost exactly as it is on the paper. And this is the back piece here. I also slanted a little around the waistline of the center back just to take off some zip bulge. So these are the flare pieces for the front and the back. Now I'll go ahead and just cut out the lining pieces for the front and the back band. So I'm cutting out the front band piece here. That's the lining. You can go ahead and also cut out lining pieces for the top and also for the flare part if you want. I'm notching the top of this band piece to know where I'll be attaching to the top part. I'm also notching this side to know the part that is going to the side. Oh, by the way, that was the back band piece. So this right here is the front band piece. I'm notching the top part, although that is already very obvious. And lastly, I'll go ahead and cut out pocket pieces. I'll be attaching pockets to the two parts of this dress. So I'm just using my hand as a guide to know how wide and how long I want it to be. No measurements at all. So I just placed my hand on it, opened it wide, and I'm cutting it out. I'm cutting out two pairs, one pair for each side of the dress. And this is where I'm going to stop with this tutorial. I'm going to have a second part, like I said in the beginning, where I'm going to share how I sewed everything together. So here are all the pieces I've cut out. I have the top pieces that go from the front across the shoulder all the way to the back, the left and the right pieces, and I have the band pieces for the front and the back, and I have the flare pieces right here, and also the two pairs of the pocket pieces. So thank you so much for watching this video up to this point. Please do well to like, share, subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Also turn on your notifications so you get notified when I post the second part of this tutorial. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.